You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Welcome back again for the second instalment this week of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I hope you listened to the episode we released yesterday, because to say that this episode is a bit of a downer for me is somewhat of an understatement, especially after those highs of the previous days in the White Mountains. As you heard yesterday, or I hope you heard yesterday, I'd felt better that at any time in the hike, and I was really getting excited about my chances. And this all changed overnight, totally and utterly. Yet I found out in these last few days what trail magic and trail angels are all about. When you need something on the trail, something imperceptible happens, and what you need will be given to you. Don't believe me? Then listen to the story of the next few days. Day 153. Pinkham Notch Visitor Centre, mile 1872.6 to Imp Campsite, mile 1885.6, a 13-mile day. When we closed the last show, the last day, I was feeling great. I had this ticklish cough and so on, but this day I had a dreadful day, terrible day in the Wildcats. The weather was beautiful again. I can't remember whether we got rain or not, but I don't believe we did at all. But it was just an awful day for me. It's extraordinary to me how your days can just change around so much by being affected by something. And we knew that it was going to be tough climbing anyway. There was no doubt about that. And we also knew that the climbs down were going to be pretty darn dreadful as well. But I couldn't. I just was never in it. I was never in the day. We had a 2,000-foot climb in 2 miles to start the day to get up Wildcat D peak. And there's a gondola at the top. I wish I'd gone up by the gondola, to be honest with you, because it was a very steep climb. Actually, it starts off coming out of Pinkham Notch Visitor Centre. Very pretty little path past the river, and then past I think they call it Lost Lake. You think, this is nice, rather enjoying this. And suddenly you start going vertically up. It feels like it's vertically up. A 2,000-foot climb in 2 miles, we've done that before. That's not a problem, but I just wasn't right. And to make it worse, a number of things happened. I started to get chest pains. And I feel what I said, my heart's beating fast. Then I'm thinking, I've got Lyme disease. I mean, it's ridiculous. And my chest pains turned out to be just gas, around my heart. And soon I was belching the wind out. But everything worries you. When you're already worried, I knew my cough was getting worse. It was getting a little bit, unpleasant as well, without going into too much detail. And I don't know, I just had so much of a problem with how I felt that day. There was just nothing right going on with me at all. I didn't feel in any sort of good sort, in any sort of the proper mind frame for hiking. It's very difficult to describe to you. I felt off balance in a lot of ways, and that being off balance was certainly something that came to fruition. I fell once, which was fall number 28, this really hurt me. I slipped on a long rock and I smashed my knee. Oh, it hurt me. I've already cut my knee once, but this really hurt me, and I was shaking my leg for a long time to try to get that better. But fall number 29, that was just diabolical, and this is no exaggeration. There's a lot of these man-made steps on the trail, obviously for going down and for going up, depends which way you're going. My fall 29 was the worst fall I think I've ever had. It was a I put my foot on this step, and Trigger, who's been an engineer, been a builder all his life, reckoned the rock I put my foot on was about a 350-pound rock, and it came loose, and it rolled with me about 10 feet down the path. I can't describe to you how it felt, but I ended up lying on the rock, between my backpack, between my body and the rock, and I got a terrible bruise on the back of my knee. It must have hit me there at some stage, but I could easily have broken something. I could have been killed from that. And he was shocked as well. Trigger was shocked when that happened. And there was another time I slipped on another rock, went down, and my following leg jarred really hard, and my knee was hurting then. So I felt like I was moaning all the time, and I hate that about myself when I'm hiking. This is a privilege to be doing it, but nothing was right on this particular day, and there was nothing that was good about what I was doing. The climbs themselves, I would have been fine with it normally, but I just kept pushing myself on, trying to get better and trying to feel okay, but I just didn't feel it in any sorts at all. We stopped eventually at the Carter Notch hut for soup, and then we had a 600-foot climb in 0.2 of a mile to start up the next peak, Carter Dome. Give you some idea what that's like. That is almost vertical climbing. It feels like almost vertical climbing anyway. We were scrambling up. I normally like that, but this was just thoroughly exhausting me all the way. And to be honest with you, I was losing confidence and pretty much hating the day. And it's the first time I've done that. I really was hating what I was doing, and the negativity creeps up inside you and takes over your mind. You've got a lot to think about and concentrate on your foot placements on, but when you start getting negative thoughts, it's telling you can't do this. You just can't do it. It's just too much for you. You're 66, you silly old fool. What are you doing? And all these negative thoughts are coming into my mind, and I hate that part of it. But then from that point, 600 feet in 0.2 of a mile, we then eventually got up to Mount Dome, and then down from that over Mount Height. And these are rocky summits, and we'd had a few spots of rain making everything more slippery. And with my balance seeming to be totally out of sorts, I was just very, very tentative with every single step, which makes it even worse for you, And then we had South and North Carter Mountains, all separated by dreadfully difficult and dangerous climbs down. I mentioned in the last episode about people talking about possible side routes around some of these dangerous climbs down, and I think that is perhaps something to consider. With the best will in the world, anybody with the best boots and the most agility is going to slip at some stage. But I felt like I was on the verge of death every second of my climb down, and I didn't actually do any of my falls on those difficult areas, to be honest with you. I just happened to do it when it was, when that rock was there and came loose. But I didn't fall. As Trigger actually went down a couple of times as well. Eventually, we reached Imp campsite with the rain starting to fall a little bit heavier. But Trigger went into the shelter, and I wanted to go in my tent. I was just miserable, wanted to be by myself, didn't want to keep everybody awake by snoring and moaning. And so really for the first time, I was doubting my ability to be able to finish this. And I find it hard that I'm saying that, but, with just 300 miles or less than 300 miles to go, or no, just over 300 miles to go, I was starting to think, I'm not going to finish this. So that was the end of a very miserable day number 153. Day number 154, Imp campsite, mile 1885.6 to US Route 2, Gorham, mile 1893.7, just an 8.1 mile day. This was a short day, but it felt way too long for me. From the moment I woke, I was just feeling off and feeling bad, and I've been coughing quite a bit the previous 2 days and 3 days, and the cough was getting worse and worse. And I found myself stumbling on the way to breakfast. I just knew that something wasn't right, but I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. I was starting to assume it was something to do with the cough, and I just didn't know what it was. We only, and I say only in, in air quotes, had Mount Moriah to go over before heading down to Route 2 and Gorham. And there were some great views on the way, but I just wasn't feeling it. There were more great views from the Rocky Summit, but, frankly, I couldn't even tell you what I was seeing. It was, I was so out of sorts. My balance was all wrong. I fell 3 times, falls number, 30, 31 and 32. Nothing serious, a little trip here, a little slip there. I can handle that sort of stuff. And I still get up and I laugh and I call out the number and I carry on. But this was just something that was, what I was feeling was debilitating, and I couldn't explain what it was, and I started to think it must be something going on inside my head. Perhaps I had an infection of some sort, and I knew I needed to see somebody. I needed to get something resolved. And the last 2 miles of this 8.1 mile day were far easier once we got down the dreadful downs once again, the slippery downs. But I just couldn't enjoy this calm walk. I knew I had issues, and I just still didn't know what they were. We called Paul from the barn, and I booked 2 nights at another place, the Top Notch Inn. I was going to take a 0, and a number of people I noticed did take 0s in Gorham. While the whites are magnificent, and they truly are, they are difficult, and they take a lot out of you. And I was kind of wondering, was it the whites that was doing this to me? Or was it just me? There was something wrong with me. And so I wanted to take a 0, but I also wanted to do a podcast. So I booked the recommendation of Paul. He let me off my second night, which was very kind of him. I booked 2 nights in the Top Notch Inn, which is a wonderful name. It's kind of a motel which normally takes a lot of ATVs, all-terrain vehicles. And it was a really nice place. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. A really lovely room as well. Trigger couldn't get into that, so he went back to the barn. And even though I wasn't staying at the barn, Paul very generously took me back to the barn and said that I was just a couple of blocks up the road to the Top Notch Inn. It was over a mile. And I know it doesn't sound much when you're walking this distance anyway. But when it's about 90 degrees, which it was, apparently it's a tropical heat wave, whatever that means, in the area, and it's humid and you've walked and you're not feeling well, this trudge along the road made me feel worse and worse and worse. And I got there and I was devastated. I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just didn't know what I was going to do at all. And I got into my room, did some laundry, and I don't think I went. No, I went next door for something to eat. I stupidly had a couple of beers, which was not a great idea, let me tell you. I started developing a headache. It wasn't a hangover at all, but it was something that was going on inside my head, obviously. And I determined that I've got to go and see somebody. So I told Trigger I was going to take another 0 the following day. And so I'd booked 2 nights in the Top Notch Inn. But really, that was the end of a depressing day number 154. And I knew I had to get this resolved, which I think I've started to do. Days 155, 156 and 157. That's Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of this week, which is the end of July, beginning of August. All 3 are 0 days. In the morning, in the Top Notch Inn, I saw a text from a listener, Gary Frechette. Gary had contacted me some time ago and was checking in to see when he might be able to host me in his home. We'd tentatively settled previously on sometime around Grafton Notch in Maine, but hadn't finalised anything. And I texted him the situation. The problem with being in Gorham, it's got great little motels and stuff and restaurants. It has not got a CVS or a Walgreens, and it doesn't appear to have any taxis either. So I was kind of stuck. There was not much I could do. I was hopefully going to get a taxi to get to Walmart, which was about a couple of miles outside town, I believe, and get some stuff, to get some I don't know, Mucinex or something like that. But I didn't know what I could. I had to respond to his text anyway, obviously, and I just said I couldn't. I'll work out a lift, but I can't get one right now. He immediately called me. We spoke on the phone, and I said to him, I'm going to try to get to a local doctor's. I've got Medicare now, happy days, and if I hadn't got a doctor by lunchtime, he said, I'm prepared to leave work and come pick you up. And I thought, well, this is too much. I can't get the guy to leave his work, but he seemed quite happy about it, to be honest with you. And I tried to get into the local doctors, but nobody could see me till 6 o'clock that night. And it wasn't an urgent care walk-in place. It was a proper doctor's office, and obviously they have appointments. So I just couldn't see anybody till 6 that night. So I let Gary know, and he left work immediately. Apparently his boss likes hiking, which is pretty good. And Gary, he knows Gary likes to help hikers. So he came to pick me up, and he had a drive of over an hour to get there. And he was there by about 11 a.m. and very kindly, top-notch in, cancelled my second night, which I'd already paid for. They didn't have to do that, but they did do that. And so they understood that I wasn't very well. And by now, I was coughing and spluttering, and I could hardly speak. So the prospect of putting up a podcast just wasn't there. We drove to South Paris in Maine and chatted all the way. We got on very well straight away, which is always nice, obviously. He's a very laid-back, easygoing guy. I really liked him. And he took me to an urgent care, got in there, gave him my Medicare bill, my Medicare card, which seemed to cover everything, which was great. And I was diagnosed with an ear infection affecting the balance, which, of course, explains so much to me. I know I fall quite a bit, to be honest with you, but I'd fallen 5 times in 2 days in the Wildcats, and that wasn't like me. I don't think on this trip I'd done more than, I may have done 2 falls, but to do 3 falls in a day, and they were pretty innocuous falls as well, my balance must have been out, I guess. So I kind of felt better about that. And he said to me, the doctor said to me, these are strong antibiotics, and these are quite strong steroids as well, prednisone or something like that. So they phoned it into Walmart. Gary took me around to Walmart, wandered in, got my drugs, and then I had to start the process then and there. There was a local cafe where he took me, and I bought us both a sandwich, which was lovely, and went to meet Kathy, his wife, and back at his home, he just took me there, and they live a simple life, no TV, which was good, by the way, because it's allowed me just to relax and sit down. And I just rested, and I sat in a chair pretty much for the rest of the day and went to bed earlier, son. And we had pasta that night, and we really bonded. I felt so at home, chatting with Gary and his passion for hiking, and Kathy, and she's an interesting woman as well. It was just was made to feel so at home. Had a very comfy bed, slept pretty damn well, actually. He actually, at that evening, he was telling us about hosting other hikers who've been through in the past, including Early Riser a couple of years ago. And I got some prospective interviews for the show. So I went to bed that night, having been desperate that morning, and starting to feel better straight away. The mere warmth of their welcome was really making me feel better. And obviously the antibiotics and steroids as well, I'm sure. The next day, which was yesterday or Wednesday, I felt a little bit better, but I asked if I could stay another day and go back to the trail on Friday. No problem at all for them. Their house, they said, our house is yours. Help yourself to anything. So, I wouldn't do that too much of that, but they just gave it over to me effectively. And Kathy made us the most delicious French toast I have ever had in my life, involving peaches, cream, and strawberries. How nice was that, eh? And I slept through the day quite a bit. I think these steroids have knocked me out a little bit, but they're trying to knock out, I suppose, whatever was wrong with me as well. And so Gary, who was working from home that day, he and I went out for a sandwich at lunch, and I slept again in the afternoon. But they were totally relaxed. They didn't mind if I were, if I was just being there. I was just existing in their home and just making myself better, which is just what I needed. I didn't know how much I needed it, to be honest with you. And then this morning, which is a Thursday, I've been in the house alone since about 7:30. And another great breakfast with some more of that French toast and some bacon. See, as you can tell, my appetite hasn't subsided. And I'm putting the podcast together. I feel so much better now. My voice isn't right, you can probably hear. And I've still got the sniffs and the coughs occasionally, but I can go for 5 or 10 minutes without coughing. So I'm trying to get the recordings in between coughing sessions. Now, Gary and Kathy have perfectly exemplified what trail magic truly is. You hear about trail magic on the Appalachian Trail, and people think of it as you turn up at a crossing and there's a hiker feed going on. That isn't trail magic. That's a hiker feed. It's great, and I certainly would never ever knock it. But true trail magic. They took me in when I needed somebody to just let me be and just to hang out, and it was perfect for them. They were happy if I was chatting with them, and they were equally happy if I wanted to sleep. They are good people with a simple desire to help hikers. I don't understand the magic and its timing, but I can tell you that I feel privileged to have spent time in the company of these two wonderful people. If I get to Katahdin, it will in large part be due to the intervention of Gary and Kathy. So that's where I am. The steroids, particularly, haven't been terribly pleasant, but I feel sufficiently recovered now to resume hiking tomorrow. Trigger's a day ahead, while Cushy is now 2 days ahead, so I'm alone. Yet I'm grateful to be moving forward once more. I may catch one or even both of them, but I won't be chasing to catch up. While I prefer to summit with these two people more than any others, I'm going to ease myself back into the trail. I know I've got to take it easy in those first couple of days again. It's been said many times you can't take on the Appalachian Trail. You have to meet it where it is. I'll be crossing the main border soon, and I'll be treating my journey with the respect it deserves. I'll get there, but only if I listen to my body and take notice of what it's telling me. I'll see you next time.